Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Bullock, and I am a third generation artist. Both my grandmother and my mother were artists and quite exceptional in their own right. My grandmother was the head of the art department at San Juan College in Farmington, New Mexico. And my mother was an accomplished artist herself, and I teach watercolor and graphic design at San Juan College in Farmington, New Mexico. And I have students ask me all the time. Sometimes, my class is full and they can't take the class, or they don't have time, or the time of day doesn't work for them, or the day doesn't work for them. So I thought I might do a variety of subjects and then share them here on YouTube. That way people can access them and have a little fun learning how to paint. This lesson today is a little bit, maybe more advanced, maybe not necessarily advanced. I'm going to start off with a sketch. I'm going to show you kind of the process. I'll speed up some things here and there, like hair, using the hair dryer or whatever to dry the thing. You don't want to watch that. So I'll speed that process up here and there. I'll even speed up the sketching process, but at least I'll get it started and kind of show you what I do and how I draw on draw my sketch on the paper. I'm going to try to get a new video out every couple of weeks. This particular lesson is going to be split into two. It's about 4 hours. It took me about 4 hours to paint this, and from start to finish. And so I hope you enjoy this. I have several other videos on this, my YouTube channel here. Most of them, well, in fact, all of them but one so far are time lapses of me doing paintings, which are fun. They're more entertainment kind of things. I really wanted to dive in. I do have one other video on this channel so far, which is a lesson I adapted from when I had to teach online, which was quite a challenge at the time during COVID. If you like what you see, give me a subscribe and a like, and share it with your friends. Anybody you think might be interested in watercolor painting, I'd really appreciate that. Just so you know, I do work in a studio space that's open to the public. So if you hear people walking by, there's a coffee shop in here as well. So there will be some background noise periodically, but I'll try to edit that out as much as possible, and we'll see how this works. Feel free to leave some comments, suggestions on how to improve. Hopefully you guys stick with me and we have a good time painting. Like I said, this lesson's going to be split into two because I know that anybody wants to sit down for 4 hours with one video. I'm going to try and release them back to back so that you have access to them right away. Anyway, yeah, give me a like, a share, maybe a subscribe. That'd really help me out. I'm going to try and grow this channel. Yeah, I hope I can continue this. So with that, let's get started. All right, everybody, here we go. So what I'm doing here is I'm taping down my paper to a drawing board real quick. It's 140 weight arches, and I have my drawing board on a slight incline. So at the top of your screen, it's about 2.5 inches higher than the board at the bottom. And I'm just going to start drawing out some kind of where my horizon's going to be. And real quick, before we get too into it, I'm going to show you the image that I'm using. It's a photo I printed out. It's of an old barn, and then here's my sketch, and I'll just stick that up on the screen here. I just want to talk a little bit about the differences. I've kind of simplified that fence in the foreground and the fence along the road, and I've simplified a bunch of other stuff as well. I should mention also that, like, I moved that bush that's up along the fence back closer to the barn. I felt that was more interesting. Also, this is in early spring, and I'm gonna paint this a little maybe early summer versus this early. I want the trees to have leaves and that kind of stuff. So uh, I've I've simplified everything and kind of rearranged a bit, and so now we can kind of get started with the sketch. So yeah, here I'm just kind of talking about, you know, there's that fence that I was talking about. All right, let's get this out of the way real quick here, and I'm just gonna start sketching this. I'm putting a little dot up at where I think that, the top of the barn should be, and then I'm gonna come in and I'm kind of thinking about where that road will be, because that's going to kind of inform where everything else is in the composition. You'll notice also that even though my road is kind of coming from the left to the right, I don't want that edge of the road, that top edge of the road, to be right in the corner. So I've kind of I've got it up a little higher, so it's not quite right in the corner, because that's a little weird. So yeah, that's I've got this kind of basic thing going here. I'm gonna just kind of darken up this line, and then I'm gonna speed this up just because the sketching part takes a while. But you can kind of see I'm eyeing out about where the roof line is, about, where the edges are. So I'm kind of thinking those things through as I'm going along here. There's kind of sketching out the trees. Come back over here and darken this up a little bit. So yeah, just quickly kind of sketching this in. Here I'm going back with that bush that I moved back closer to the edge of or next to the barn, I should say. And I'm just kind of sketching in a quick little, yeah, here we go. Let's zoom in on that so you can see it a little bit better. I'm just kind of giving myself kind of a brushy bottom to that barn, just so it looks like it's sort of sitting down in that grass. So I'm just going to I'm just, kind of taking each section at a time. And bear in mind, this is sped up, so don't don't feel like you need to sketch this fast, because I don't sketch this fast. But I wanted to show you the sketching process, but at the same time, I didn't want to eat up, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes with you watching me sketch. So we'll just kind of work our way through here. I've got some more brush. And I don't know if you noticed a little discrepancy when I showed the sketch on screen, and then when I had it on my drawing board there, and then when I popped it up onto the screen, I actually ended up adding some mountains to the background, just because I felt like it needed a little something else out there. And I live in New Mexico, and we're a fairly mountainous state, and I kind of like to make things look like here. So I can't remember where this barn is from, but and I'm gonna make the image available, as well as my sketch. I'll have the links to those down in the description. That way you can download them and take a look at them, try and see what you think. Maybe you want to try this, so you can paint along with me. Yeah, so I'm just kind of adding in that, inner wall of the barn there, through that big double door opening, and I keep hearing my chair squeak, so I'm gonna have to oil this chair, I think.
All right, we're almost done with the sketch. Uh, yeah, so just kind of making sure I like the curve that I've got coming in there, making sure I like these shapes that I've drawn back in here. And the thing to keep in mind with all this is that these are all kind of suggestions. So I'm not going to follow a lot of stuff. Yeah, here I go putting those mountains in. The trees, the shapes will change a little bit as I go. Even, like this post will probably change a little bit. I think I'm using, what type of pencil am I using there? I'm not exactly sure. It's like a, well, I was using a Blackwing 602, and then I think it was like an HB or something. Not that that's important. So here I just wanted to kind of show you my palette. I'm getting a little, first color that I put out there was Permanent Yellow Deep. That's a Holbein color. The second color I put out there was a Permanent Green #1. And then I got Permanent Yellow Orange. And then I've got a little Scarlet Lake. And the Scarlet Lake, I don't remember what brand that is. It may be Holbein too. But most of these are Holbein. There I've got a little Peacock Blue. That's also Holbein. So, yeah, just kind of creating some puddles. I'm going to start in the foreground. I like to do that. That's just, it's not really a formula. Sometimes I don't. But in this case, I am. I'm going to start in the foreground. I'm going to paint that, kind of the grass around the road and that stuff. And again, I want this to be kind of early summer, late spring. So maybe, the grass isn't quite turned green, but the leaves have all sprouted out. Or the leaves are sprouted out and it's maybe a little dry summer. I don't know. But here we go. So I'm just going to come in. I have a fairly wet wash, and this is that Permanent Yellow Deep. It looks a little oranger on screen than it actually is. It's kind of a medium yellow. I really like that color, that yeah, hue, I guess. And so I'm just kind of filling it in where I think it's going to go, and periodically I'm going to change the color up. I don't want this all to look the same. So here I'm grabbing. Let's see. That's a little opera, which I know I didn't put out. But again, put out on the palette. I didn't create a puddle of that, but that's what I'm using there is a little opera. Also a Holbein color. Then I grabbed a little Scarlet Lake. So now I'm loading up with the Permanent Green #1. And I'm just kind of, you'll notice I'm overlapping the lines a little bit. I'm not too overly concerned with staying within the lines, especially on the base of that barn there. And I just want these colors to kind of blend in. I'm picking up, there I'm using a thirsty brush to kind of pick up some of that excess color and move it over. I'm going to grab a little more of that. What am I using here? Oh yeah, it's Permanent Yellow Deep. And then, let's see. Yeah, I've got some more of that Permanent Yellow, or Permanent Green #1. Just a little Scarlet Lake. And I'm just putting these in because I want this to look like, a field does. You get dry grass and some grass, maybe it's a little wetter in that area, so the grass is greener. But it's never just green or yellow. It's a variety of different colors. So I'm just kind of, there's the top of that grass that kind of overlaps into the trees in the background. I've overlapped the barn a little bit, and that's because I'm going to use other color on top of this to kind of sculpt the bottom of those things. So I'm not too overly concerned with being perfect. A little peacock blue there just for some variety, just to make it interesting. Yeah, just overlapping and softening that line up there. I don't want a hard edge, so I'm just coming in with a brush. It's a clean brush with just water, and I'm just kind of softening those edges. Yeah, everything there. So that's all that is. I mean, it's a real quick, easy, very watery wash, very little color. I always think that watercolor should be, you think of it as a can of soup. It's in the ingredients in a can of soup. If you have water listed first, you're in trouble. If you have chicken, you're doing all right. So watercolor is in the title, watercolor. So you want to use more water than color, especially in these initial washes where you're coming in. So I just dried that real quick with a hair dryer. That was a little time lapse, just to speed up the process. All right, so I'm going to come in with a little permanent yellow deep here. And I'm using, so that first brush I was using was my 1-inch flat. And now I'm using a number 8 round. And so I started off with permanent yellow deep, and now I've got a little permanent yellow orange. Something about the brushes I use, I like these, and I'm not paid by anybody. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I like these Low Cornell 70-20 Ultra rounds. That's LOEW-CORNELL, Low Cornell. And that's the 70-20 Ultra round. And then my 1-inch flat, they don't make it anymore. It's a Lang & Nickel, I think it's a 30-35 combo, and it's actually a sign painting brush, but they make a 1.5-inch still, but I think they discontinued the 1-inch. But if you can find it, it's a great brush, and that's by Lang Nickel. So here I've got, that was a little Scarlet Lake that I added just down there in the bottom, and I'm just kind of using a little what we call negative painting to sculpt the top of, I'm using the bottom of the barn, which is slightly darker in value than the grass in front of it, and I'm using that darker, slightly darker value to inform what the the grassy shapes at the top. Here I've switched back to permanent yellow deep, still using my number 8 round. It's a great brush. They're synthetic, but really soft and absorbent. There I just added a little peacock blue, so just to kind of change it up and make it interesting. So yeah, I've got a little of that. I'm going to pull that down. Maybe I'll switch back here to, let's see. Oh yeah, that's a little alizarin crimson here that I've switched to. Had a little brain fart there for a minute. Couldn't think of what color that is. Yeah, just kind of bringing that down in here. And I'm switching back and forth to just using the tip of my brush, and then at other times I'm pushing down harder so I get a bigger stroke. Sometimes I'll use the side of that brush, so I'll sweep it across sideways, and that gives a lot more coverage in a shorter amount of time. Here I've got that alizarin crimson, and actually, I don't know why I said alizarin crimson. That first darker kind of violet that I used is quinacridone violet, and that's also a Holbein color. I used to use permanent magenta, but I couldn't find it for a long time, so I switched up to that quinacridone violet, which I like a lot. It's very similar. Here I'm adding a little opera just to kind of, and all this is still while it's wet. So none of this is really dried. It's still fairly wet, and I I want these colors to run and fuse, but I don't want to actually mix them. I'm sort of letting them mix themselves on the paper. So, and in order for that to work, you really need to be working with a fairly watery wash. So, yeah, I'm going to add a little more peacock blue here. And it's fun, it mixes itself. It stays a little peacock blue, but it also gives a little green tint to it. And even though, like in my mind, well, in the source photo, the barn's white, but I kind of like a red barn. This is kind of like a faded, red barn in my mind. So that's what I'm going for here. And this is my painting, so I don't have to stick to what reality is. And if I wanted to reproduce if I wanted to paint ultra realistic and reproduce that actual spot, well, that's what photography is for. But I want to be able to change it to the way I want it. I want it to look more a little artistic, a little more impressionistic. And that's kind of what I'm going for here. So that's why I like to do a lot of color changes. Here I'm adding a little more opera. Just to, give it that little zhuzh, I guess. I don't know, for lack of a better word. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. Just kind of make it a little more interesting. And then I'm going to hit it with a dryer real quick. This is kind of sped up again. You like my racing stripe on that dryer? I used to work at a sign shop, and that was like a scrap of vinyl. All right, so next step, I'm going to come in. Again, I'm using that number 8 brush. I'm going to start on the kind of shadow side of this barn, and I'm going to add a little opera. And even though opera is a very light color, I like to use it in shadows because it gives me the idea that maybe light's bouncing off of something else. And then even though it's in shadow, you're getting a little bit of that bounced light. Here I've got that quinacridone violet that I just put down. And then now I've got a little peacock blue again. So just kind of a fun. All these are Holbein colors so far. If it's something else, like I use Andrews turquoise a lot. That's an American Journey color, which now is available at Journey Art Stuff. It used to be Cheap Joe's. But yeah, so just kind of bringing this dark down in there. So I switched up to the quinacridone violet that I mixed with a little royal blue, so it's a little darker. And again, the royal blue is a Holbein color. yeah, just decided to add a little more opera up here. It just didn't feel like I had enough. And it's great. You know, opera is a very, very transparent color. So it's very light. So you know, whatever's underneath shows through quite nicely. So like in the case of if it's again on top of white paper, then the white of the paper shows through quite nicely. So yeah, just coming back in now with that quinacridone violet royal blue mix. Let's see, that's a little alizarin crimson now. You know, none of these colors are particularly dark, but they're you know they're darker than the the colors on the light side of it. And this is just our first wash, so we'll be adding more to all this as we go. So there I'm coming back in with a little. That's actually Hooker's green mixed with royal blue, so it gets it a little darker. So that's what that is. So so I just basically mixed it until it made a kind of blue green. Yeah, and then just coming back in. I think I'm barely just basically just kind of clean my brush a little bit and I'm picking up some of that color that's already on the paper and moving that around. And once the brush picks some up, you can move it on the other side. And you can see I'm painting around my fence. I don't know if I necessarily need to do this, but I kind of wanted to. Here in a little while, well, you know, I could have used like masking fluid or something like that, but I don't need it to be perfect. I just wanted a little bit of light still in there. So coming in here, gonna paint around that tree that I haven't put in there. And probably if I had been smart, I would have painted that tree first, but it's all right. It'll all work out. And I don't even mind, you know, that side of the tree over there is going to be the dark side of the tree anyway, so I kind of want to get a little lost edge. So we'll come in with this edge of the barn. And again, that's some quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, and then a little bit more royal blue than quinacridone violet as we get towards the bottom. So it's a little more on the blue side. At the top, it's a little more on the violet side. So just kind of getting that blocked in, basically. So here we go. I'm going to zoom in now. Since I'm going to be working on this side. So I'm going to come in with this, since I was doing shadows, I'm going to paint the bottom side of this eave that's coming down in here. So this is going to be in shadow. And that's just quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue. And then I'm adding a little opera, because again, I feel like there might be light bouncing off of you know, the other eave or the wall itself. So even though it's in shadow, you know, it might be a little lighter just because it's getting that light bouncing off. Even though it's, you know, even though wood's not really a reflective surface, you still get that bounce of light. You'll get it off of trees and stuff. So that's where that's coming from. That's why I'm doing that. So then at the bottom there, that's just some royal blue again. And then now I've got a little of that quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue. It's kind of a purple, you know, to make kind of a purple. And then a little bit more opera. And then I'm going to sort of let these two bleed in together. You know, It's all right if it does. I'm not too particular. So I just, kind of giving the idea that there's an eave sticking out from the edge of the, from the face of the barn there, from the front. So now I'm going to start off on the trees up in here, and I'm using a little permanent yellow permanent yellow lemon. That's again a Holbein color, but you could use, cadmium lemon, cadmium yellow lemon, or cadmium lemon yellow, however they buy, any brand. I just happen to use Holbein colors. I really like them. So, but I also have some Winsor Newton, some Daniel Smith, some American Journey. So yeah, I'm just looking at where. So I just had that general tree shape sketched in there, and now I'm thinking about where light would be hitting. Like the tops of, maybe there's a tree in the back that's really huge. There's one in the front, or maybe that's just a clump of the one in the front that's sticking out a little further and catching light. I switched up to a little permanent yellow, or no, permanent green number 1. And now I'm just spritzing it with a bottle just to keep it a little wet. So that's just water that I was spraying on there. And it's a special kind of bottle. I'll go into it a little bit later, but so yeah, this is just again permanent green number 1. Really watery. Even where it seems dark, that's mostly just the camera causing that to seem like it's darker. It is. Also, because it's wet, but it will dry a little lighter. I'm going to come in and kind of try and carefully follow the edge of this top of the barn roof there. I'm not worried about covering every little bit. I'm leaving little areas of white. I can always come back in and, cover those, but once you do it, you don't ever get that back. So for right now, I'm kind of leaving chunks of white, little areas where I'm not covering every square inch. So, and again, this is just still using the hookers. I mean, no, the permanent green number 1. I think here I'm adding a little. Oh, yeah, there it is. I didn't have quite enough on my brush, and now I've got a little too much. But that's okay because I can put some paint down, and then I can pick it back up. It's still wet. Even up here, I'm re-wetting that. Maybe I think I'm adding a little bit more lemon yellow. Yeah. So bringing that back down. Now I basically cleaned my brush out, and I'm just using water to kind of move that. Well, and now I've picked up some more paint. So at first I was just kind of spreading it out, adding a little water, and then I picked up some more paint. Again, I'm just going to add a little more. And this is, excuse me, this is actually peacock blue that I'm using right now, which you might think that's a little weird, but it just gives a little variety of color. Here I'm going to come in with a little permanent yellow lemon. This is again as another kind of top of a bush or small tree, whatever. Just adding that light yellow in there. And if it runs together, that's okay. I know that it won't run into my barn because that's 100% dry. But if the trees run into each other, that's okay. So now I'm still using that permanent green number 1 back in there now. So just kind of moving it around, making these kind of tree shapes. I don't know what kind of tree that is. Just making it up. So I added a little quinacridone violet just to make it a little more vibrant, since red and green are complementary. Violet and green are as well, so or more so. But so I'm just adding that in there a little. It just makes it more vibrant. It makes it more interesting. You get a little bit of that in the darker areas of the trees. Yeah, just gonna. So here we're coming in with a little permanent green number one again. I'm just gonna get the bottom of this little tree area and maybe kind of work into a little the tops of that kind of brushy grass that's behind the barn. Uh, yeah, just and again, these are all kind of first washes. I'm going to go back in and add a little more. Here I am just kind of experimenting. I'm adding a little of that. That's quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, but it's more blue than violet this time. So just kind of experimenting down there, seeing. It's not that dark yet. It will get darker. Well, it'll dry lighter than it is right now, and then I'm going to add another layer or two as we keep going. Okay, so now I'm going to grab some permanent yellow lemon, and I'm just going to, again, this is just like those other trees. I'm adding some highlights first, and then I'm going to come in with some darker green, which is not really dark. It's permanent yellow, or I mean, sorry, permanent green number one, which is the lightest green I have. Well, that I'm currently using. And if you want something even lighter, you can mix a little of the lemon yellow with that permanent green number one to make it a little lighter. So yeah, now I've got some Hooker's green, and this is slightly darker than regular Hooker's green. I've added just a skosh of royal blue to it, and then now I've switched up again. I've got some peacock blue that I'm adding in there, and this is just for variety. It reads like green. Once I'm going to be done with this, it'll look just like different greens. So now I'm adding a little of that quinacridone violet that I mixed with royal blue. And it's just a little bit of royal blue mixed in. So I want it mostly violet. I don't want, I don't want it overly blue because I want that that vibrancy from the complementary colors. So now I'm going back with a little Hooker's green. I want it dark on this side. My light source is coming from the left-hand side of the paper, and I'm adding just a little bit more of that lemon yellow to some spots up in here. Just dropping it in. What's funny about the lighter colors is if everything's still wet, they will, because there's more water with those lighter colors, they'll displace the darker color and push that down because my paper's on an angle. Because I have this board on an incline. Now I'm just going back in. This is actually indigo that I'm using. It's a little bit darker. And again, this is Holbein color that I'm using. You don't have to use Holbein. I mean, that just happens to be the brand I'm using. I'm kind of agnostic on the type of paint. Uh, you can get, as long as it's professional grade, I think you can get really good results with any paint. Uh, I am kind of a stickler for the paper. So here we're coming in with a little lemon yellow. I've moved over to the other side of the paper, the left hand side, and I've kind of zoomed in here for you. And this is just some lemon yellow. Uh, I think the reason it looks a little dark is just because of the way the lights um, hitting the paper. Um, but there could have, well, actually, I don't even think there was any. There might have been a slight amount of green in my paint, but it's still, it's reading the way I want it to. So, and now this is that permanent green number 1, and it's really just kind of continuing the way I was painting the other trees. I'm just dropping some color in. Everything's really wet still, so things can flow together. I've got the paper on an angle. So coming back in with that permanent green number 1. And, just painting these nice little trees here. A little darker. And really by darker, I just mean there's more pigment in that. Here I'm using a spray bottle, and I kind of tipped it up so you could see the top of it. And it has a little arrow with a dot on it. If you find any of these Holbein spray bottles, maybe used or somebody selling them or whatever, make sure that they have that little dot behind the arrow. Currently, the new ones don't, and they don't work correctly. But that bottle sprays kind of a varied dot pattern. It's not a fine mist, and you don't have to push the button down as deep. So it gives you kind of this large and tiny and big and medium-sized dots of water. It's a little hard to see on the paper because it was just clean water, but I was kind of spritzing that just to get a little more moisture on the paper and to get that to kind of run a little bit better. So there I was using a little peacock blue, and now I'm coming in with some quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, and really it's kind of mixing on the paper. I'm just going to bring that down, just kind of filling in this area that I think will represent this clump of trees right here. And I'm thinking about those, like maybe I want some, shrubby kind of things in underneath the tree there. So that's why I kind of painted those shapes the way I did. So I'm sort of using that negative painting to create that shape of those shrubby things at the bottom. I'm not going to name them, so here I'm dropping in a little opera, just to give it that little brighter look. Maybe these are flowering trees. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I just like that color variation. So just a little bit more. This is actually alizarin crimson that I'm dropping in there. Or no, not alizarin crimson. Why did I say it's Scarlet Lake? So, and then back with that quinacridone violet. And you can see that I'm still not covering everything. I'm leaving little speckles of white. You know, I can always come back and fill those in, but I like that sort of dappled leaf kind of feel. So, yep, just a little more of that quinacridone violet mood with lit mixed with permanent, or I mean royal blue. Here we've got the permanent yellow lemon going back in. These are just, you know, this is where the sun's going to be hitting the tops of those trees or bushes or whatever that is back there. And then here's that permanent green number 1 again. And I'm just kind of thinking about the way the grass is going to look as it overlaps those bushes. And by painting this darker color, this behind or over it, it makes it look like it's behind the grass. That was a little opera, and then there's some peacock blue. And it's funny, the opera on the screen, or at least my screen, looks kind of orange, but there we're going in with some indigo again, just to, you know, add a little bit of dark down at the bottom. It's still very watery, so even though it looks really dark, it'll dry a little lighter than what we're seeing. So it's just really, you know, because it's wet. And we're going to just kind of come in and kind of shape the top of that shrubby, brushy grass, whatever it is. It doesn't. I'm not really naming it. You know, it's just a shape I'm looking at. And again, that was some quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, and now I'm dropping in a little scarlet lake. Just kind of moving the color around. So now I'm going to come over and do some darks inside the barn. So this is that quinacridone violet. I've mixed a little royal blue in, so it's a little more blue. And then here I'm using opera again, just to sort of show that reflected light coming in from outside, even though it's a non-reflective surface. Here I've got some peacock blue, and I'm just filling that in. Here I'm using the tip of my brush to again kind of sculpt that grassy, shrubby stuff in front of the barn. You know, in the source photo, the barn's not as overgrown, maybe, but in my painting, I want it to look a little run down and forgotten. It's not, you know, it's just they haven't driven the tractor out in a while, so the grass is tall. That was a little hooker's green that I dropped down in there. Just to kind of get a variety of colors. You know, I could just use black, but that would be extremely boring, kind of flat, and I don't want it that dark yet. This is basically the level of dark that back wall that you'll see eventually comes in. So here I'm kind of filling in the lighter areas where these slats that go across are. So I started off with a little lemon yellow, and then that's a little peacock blue, just to kind of give that color variation. Now I'm using a little quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, just kind of putting it in there. I am conscious of shapes, but you know, I'm just kind of filling in that area. Now I'm not too worried about those lines that are going across because those are going to be slats that are in the dark. So here I'm going to add a little permanent yellow deep right in here just to make that bush a little bit different than the trees that are behind it. Now I've added a little alizarin crimson. And that's just in it here. I'm just moving that around. I cleaned my brush out so it was just water so I could soften that edge, and then oh, I'm going to pick some of it up there. I think it was a little too much moisture, so I just used a terry cloth rag. You know, you can buy them at Costco or Sam's. I'm going to dry this real quick here. I'm not even going to fully dry it. I'm just kind of trying to, you know, this area over here next to that fence post is still pretty wet. And I'm just going to add a little more. I feel like I need a little more of a highlight at the top here, so I'm just going to add that in. Here we're just picking some of that green up, pulling that up. Softening some of these edges. They got a little hard. I want them to be softer, especially closer to the edge of the paper. So just dropping in a little lighter yellow. Also, I'm not super happy with the shape that I've got here, so I'm going to just pull this in, you know, this section of trees up a little taller. It was looking like a little bit of a straight line going across to that larger tree closer to the barn. So I just kind of want some varied height, varied color. I'm going to drop in a little more of that yellow. Don't be afraid of, you know, yes, you can make mud if you get going too much, but don't be afraid to try and drop in a little lighter color on top of the darker color, because it will, as long as it's still wet, it will displace that. So now I'm using a little alizarin crimson. That's what I dropped in just a second ago. I was still talking. And I'm just going to start shaping some of these front areas of the tree. So there's some bits of tree that kind of stick out towards us. They're going to be lighter than the stuff that's behind it. So I'm kind of sculpting that with the brush, adding a little bit of that alizarin crimson in there to kind of make that back clump a little darker. I'm going to pull in a little more yellow here. Cool thing is, if I don't like this, I can always reshape it with those mountains behind. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but you know, if something doesn't fit or doesn't work right, I can come in, because these mountains are going to be, you know, darker violet or something. So now I'm going to dry it again and get that kind of locked in, which doesn't mean I can't change my mind later and lift some stuff out. I'll be talking about that later. So here I'm going to come in with that darker, and in this case this is indigo. Again, I don't really like using black. I don't know, it's a flat color and it's not that interesting. So I'm going to use indigo here. It's a nice dark blue. And that'll just help push that back, because that's an opening into another portion of the barn. Here I'm dropping in a little quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue. It's still very dark, and the reason it's darker than where I've used it in the past is A, I have more blue in it, and B, I have more pigment. So just kind of coming in, thinking about that shape. There's a little door, and then there's a big arch kind of thing. So, you know, where equipment can be pulled back in there, or maybe there's stalls for horses or cattle, or so, you know, man, I don't know. So, and then and then I'm kind of leaving those lighter areas of stuff jutting up that look like, you know, tall grass or whatever. Here I'm coming in again. This is that royal blue mixed with quinacridone violet. It's again leaning towards the blue. And these are all those slats that are going across that back wall. So you can see through to the outside through that back wall because it's slatted. You know, it might be for drying things or whatever. They get ventilation in there. I don't know. But, so, just kind of going in with my, now in this case I am using a smaller brush. I'm using my number 6 round. You know, whatever you can get a good point with. My number 10 and my number 8 are starting to get a little worn around the edges. I mean, I've been using them for like 4 or 5 years. So they do eventually wear out. But they do last much longer than, say, a full natural fiber brush like a sable or something. And those are so expensive. I just as soon use one of these. I mean, I have some sables that I spent a lot of money on, and I just don't see the point. They're beautiful, lovely brushes, but they just wear out so fast, and these last a long time. So anyway, I get a better point with that number 6. So that's the only reason I'm using that tiny brush. So we're just going to add a little bit of a dark edge along this post, and then this edge of the doorway there. You know, it's kind of a double door. And then I'm going to come in and continue the darks. That's some indigo again. And I'm not fully filling in. You know, maybe there's stuff that's catching light on the inside. I don't want this like a solid dark. So now I'm switching it up. I've got a little of the violet, the quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, just for that. So, and again, you can see I'm not necessarily filling in everything. There's something back there that's reflecting light. Here, I'm going to put a little window over here on this side. Again, not totally filling in everything quite yet. This leaves options. So I got another window here. You know, I'm leaving some stuff. That first I was using the quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, and then I switched over to some indigo. But I am leaving some area of lighter color behind it. Just random shapes, not supposed to be anything other than just random shapes that are interesting. Oh, I see I made a little boo-boo there. Let me touch that with my hand. So let me just soften that. The trick is not to panic. I'm going to be adding more texture to this grass, so this will just help me out. I don't know, it may end up being underneath a shadow later, or it may not, I don't know. But I'm not going to panic about a little dark right there. Just going to fix that little bit of the bottom. The trick with this is to not panic. So I'm just adding a little bit more dark along here, just to kind of emphasize that contrast between the light side and the dark side. First was some quinacridone violet just by itself. Now I'm using a little peacock blue, and then just kind of cleaning up that edge a little bit. Now I'm going to just pick a little bit of that up because it might be a little too much. Just picking up some of the excess water. I basically squeezed my brush out and picked up that water, and now I'm kind of moving that water that was on the paper around. And the reason I'm moving some of that peacock blue to the other side of this fence post is I don't want a color to stop on the edge of a fence post and then not pick up on the other side of the fence post because it makes it look weird. So here I'm just going to dry that real quick. So now that it's dry, I'm going to come in with a little quinacridone gold. If you don't have quinacridone gold, yellow ochre is fine. I just happen to like quinacridone gold better than yellow ochre, but they're kind of interchangeable. The quinacridone gold I think is a little more vivid and brighter, but yellow ochre is fine. And so I'm just kind of coming in and painting those the slats of wood and the posts. I'm not too careful, I'm not trying to make it perfect. I'm just kind of going in. There might be little areas of white. I'm just kind of getting that filled in there. I'll go back in and add some darks eventually. So just adding, still the quinacridone gold. Or if you want yellow ochre, it's all really good, either color. And then I've got a little quinacridone burnt orange that I'm using kind of on the edge there. Not a lot of it, just kind of. I mean, everything's still pretty wet, so, but it's not, it's wet on dry, so it's not that wet yet. So I'm just kind of painting a little bit of an edge, and it kind of has dried a little bit. So we'll just kind of come in and add a little bit of that shadow edge. Kind of helps add depth to the shapes. It's kind of coming across. That's that quinacridone burnt orange, and I did mix it with a little blue just to give it a little bit of a darker neutral. So I mixed it with the royal blue. A little more on this side just to give that fence a little more shape. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to the rest of this fence. And, I'm not going to put a lot of detail or effort into this. Again, it's pretty close to the edge of my painting. It's really just there to kind of help pull your eye back down and around into the fence. Or, I mean, into the road, which will pull you back over onto the left side of the painting, and that fence post pulls you back up and around. So that's kind of what I'm doing here with that. So not a lot of detail. Now I'm just going to dry that real quick and then hit it with, still was a little wet. Just hit that with the dryer, get that. I put a little more water in this mix than I had in the other, so I wasn't able to go in quite as fast with the dark. But now you can see I'm kind of coming back in. Maybe there's a little wire or something on that. Not too worried about it. This, come in and add just a bit more dark over here. I feel like it just needs a little bit more. And that's just that quinacridone burnt orange mixed with blue. It's royal blue. But you could use indigo, whatever. Just, if you're using the indigo, then it's a little less pigment to water. And here I'm adding a little indigo dark down in there just to, kind of break up those shapes, make it look a little bit more like tree trunks maybe or something. Currently I'm not really doing much in the, branches or anything. I just wanted to kind of give that impression. So I'm thinking I need to, just to be, especially when I go to paint this this road, I'm gonna I'm going to actually uh, tape this fence post off. I don't, it's mostly going to be dark, but there are going to be some areas of light. And I just want to make sure I save those and I don't have to do a lot of lifting. I could have used masking fluid again, but now that we're in the middle of this, I don't want to take the time to wait for masking fluid to dry or anything like that. So I'm I'm going to tape this off, and I'm basically just following along with my X-Acto knife very carefully, not to only cut through the tape and not my paper. So you put a little pressure, but not a lot, and you should be able to cut just through the tape and not the paper. So I'm just gonna kind of follow that edge along, and yeah, trim this up here. Oop, kind of tape tore in the wrong direction, but that's all right. We'll just come up here and peel up this edge, and we'll get the rest of that. There we go. Well, let's see here if I can get that. I obviously didn't push hard enough right through there, so I'm getting a little bit of there we go. Now it's working. It's a fine line of pushing too hard and not hard enough. So I would err on the side of not pushing hard enough, because you can always come back in and kind of redo things and stuff like that. So there we go. We got that. Then I'm just going to kind of look at the bottom here. This is less important, but I do kind of want it to be a little jaggedy. It's going to be in dark. It's going to be in shadow for the most part. But I don't want it a straight line across, just in case some of that shows through. All right. So we got that taped off nice, and I'm going to just kind of burnish it a little bit, just to make sure it sticks and seals that paper really good. And then because I was using the hairdryer, the tape on my edge was kind of bubbling up a little bit, so I just pressed it back down. All right, so here I'm coming in with a little permanent yellow deep, and then well, no, actually, why did I say permanent yellow deep? I'm coming in with a little Scarlet Lake. My brain's going or something there. So that's very watered down Scarlet Lake. Here we've got a little quinacridone violet that I'm just adding in a few spots, just to give it some varied color. And then I kind of clean that up a little bit. I'm going to zoom in a little bit better. There we go. It looks a lot like alizarin crimson, but it's so watery that it does look very similar to that, but it's actually the quinacridone violet. But it's the pure quinacridone violet without any blue mixed in. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to use, now this is more of that, well, this is permanent yellow orange that I'm using right here. And in this case, I'm just kind of adding some texture. All I'm doing is adding more color and thinking about grass shapes or brushy shapes. And I'm just going to build up another layer of color on top of this to add texture. So here I'm using a little permanent green number 1. And then I clean my brush out, and now I'm just softening the edges there. I want some of that to be, a few little hard edges, a few soft lost edges. And even, I'm not painting every stroke. Here we've got more of that permanent or no, I mean, that's alizarin crimson right there. Uh, I mean, it is permanent alizarin crimson, but I was about to say permanent quinacridone. Or, I don't know what I was trying to say. Here we've got a little more of that alizarin crimson. And that's, again, Holbein color, but I've used any number of brands, and they're all pretty good. So now I'm just softening things with a little water. Now here I've loaded some permanent yellow orange. If you don't have permanent yellow orange, cadmium orange is pretty close. It's the same. Here in the studio, we have a studio cat who likes to drink my paint water, and I was worried about, excuse me, I was worried about poisoning the cat, so I kind of got rid of all the cadmium colors in my palette. I just don't use them anymore because of that. They are poisonous. I mean, it'd take a lot, but she drinks a lot of my water. Also, she likes to walk through my paint, so I just have to keep that covered. So that's a little permanent green #1 that I've added in here. Just changing shapes, moving things around, adding texture. That's a little too much, so I'm just going to pick some of that up. I'm not worried about individual blades of grass, or I'm just looking at shapes that kind of feel and seem like grass, but they don't have to look just like grass. Yeah, now I'm just kind of thinking, okay, well, do I want to soften this? What do I want to do here? So this is, again, mostly water in my brush. I got a little peacock blue there that I'm adding. Just kind of coming in with a little shape, a little multi-direction kind of thing. Just kind of pick that up a little bit. It was too dark right there. Come back over here now. That's a little opera. It looks darker than it actually is, and it'll definitely dry a lot lighter. So I'm just gonna kind of, and maybe those are blooming flowers. Maybe they're, it doesn't really matter. Seed pod type do hitchy. I don't know. That's a little permanent green or permanent yellow orange that I added there. And now I've got a little mix of both. I'm going to clean my brush out and just come over and pick up some of that, lighten some of that. So, a little more opera over here on this edge. And some more back up in here. It's just variation in color. I'm just trying to make it look, if you look at a field, it's not going to all be green or yellow or whatever. It's going to have yellows and greens and reds and darks and lights. I had a little more green up in here. And actually, that's peacock blue. I don't know why I said green. Just, it'll start reading like a kind of a blue-green, so. And then we'll just keep adding a little over here. That's the permanent yellow deep. A little permanent yellow green. Nope, permanent green number 1. Just pick up some of that, let them run together. Now I'm just using water to move that around. I clean my brush out and it's just water. A little more over here. There we go. Had too much water and not enough pigment. Then again, I want a little bit of both colors, you know, that orangey yellow color and the green on both sides of that post so that it feels like it's working together and it's not just stopping behind the post mysteriously. Drop in a little more opera here just to give you that variation. But you can see here I'm just adding bits and blobs and little tick marks and whatnot to kind of give that impression of grassy texture. Alright, so just continuing on. Let's pick up a little. Basically, I just cleaned my brush out. I just picked up a little water right there to just kind of soften some of that. I'm going to add a little more of that quinacridone violet. I don't know, that looks like a weird made-up signature right there, but that's all right. Looks like, you know, fake calligraphy. So I'll just soften that up here a little bit. And again, that was just, you know, water now that I'm moving that around with. I haven't reloaded paint or anything. Just kind of change that up a little bit. Made it a little darker. And now we've got some green coming in here. And that's that permanent green number 1 that I used there. Well, and there I picked up a little peacock blue, just to make it a little, you know, blue or green. Okay, let me zoom back out here. I'm going to kind of show you the palette again. And so this is, I'll just kind of show you what I'm going to work on here. Let's see, I'm going to grab a little. That's the quinacridone violet, and then I just I put the pure quinacridone violet down, and then because I felt like maybe that was a little too much, and then I mixed it over there with a little of the royal blue quinacridone violet that I had, and I picked a little bit more up right there. And I'm going to come in. I'm doing the mountains now, and I'm just going to kind of go along that top edge and kind of work my way down to the tops of the trees. So just kind of filling in that area. It's mostly water, very little pigment, but just kind of filling that in. Just going to kind of, soften that now. I'm just going to add a little more water. So, oh crap. Forgot to zoom in. I forgot to change the thing. I'm so sorry. But here you can kind of see what I was doing. Sorry about that. Doggone it. Totally forgot to move the camera there for you guys. I'm sorry about that. But just coming in with a very watery wash of that quinacridone violet and royal blue. And there could be a little indigo mixed in with that too. But not that much. And I'm starting to look at how I want the tops of those trees to look. I'm adding a little more dark over here because that's, going to be the shadow side of this mountain. And, maybe there's a little valley kind of thing coming up in there. I don't know. Just add a little darks that you can see through the tree. So, yeah, just placing a little extra in there in some of those little spots that you'd be able to see through the trees. And now I'm just going to continue on with this mountain on this side. Again, this is that quinacridone violet royal blue mix. And I'm just going to add a little more dark over here, just see what happens. A little water to this section. Pull that down into here. I'm not sure I like that shape of the mountain that much. So we're gonna change that up a little bit. Maybe something in there. I don't know. I don't know if that's any better or not, but that's where we're at. Just add a little bit more water over here. That just kind of gets the paint to kind of run, and the water pushes the paint away so you get some light areas. Now I'll just add a little bit more in there, just in a few little dots to show that it's kind of peeking through. Now lift some of that water back up. I may have a little too much. Yeah, just gonna use a thirsty brush. We'll just add a little more water over here, just get that to flow a little. Cause some interesting shapes. This is where I use blossoms to my benefit. I like those. I know a lot of people are like, how do you get rid of blossoms? But I feel like they add free texture. I didn't have to really work for that hard. Alright, so now I'm going to use my 1-inch flat brush, and I've got some quinacridone gold here. Looks a little red, but it's really quinacridone gold. And then now I've got some opera. And this is, I'm just kind of laying down my first wash for this road. Kind of blending the two a little bit, but mostly letting the water blend them. I'm not really doing a lot of continued working of that paint into it. So I switched up to some peacock blue here, just for some color change, just to make it interesting. And you'll see that I'm pulling it across to kind of give it that kind of horizontal feel almost. So I want to pull it across. To kind of mimic the way, like wheels or whatever would form ruts. If I were to do it perfectly perpendicular with or parallel with the bottom of the paper, or perpendicular to the sides, then it would look weird. But in this case, I want it to kind of flow along with the shape of the road. So that was a little permanent yellow deep that I threw in there. Now a little bit more peacock blue, just kind of pull it in. And what that does is it kind of grays that up a little bit. Now I'm just going to pick some of that excess back up and then kind of add some streaks with the edge of my brush. I was using a thirsty brush. What I do is I squeeze out all the moisture that I can, but it's still damp, and it'll go in and pick up that excess paint. Alright, so I got that first layer on there. Now I'm going to come over here and work on the roof of this barn. That's a little opera that I've got in my brush, and then now I just used a little peacock blue, and you can see the difference between what I was doing before and what I'm doing now. I'm using very little pigment and a lot of water, mostly water in this case. So it's a very watery wash that I'm doing. And again, this is wet on dry. Um, it's not super wet, but it's wet enough to kind of flow. So there's a little bit more peacock blue, just kind of following along there. Now I've kind of changed the angle a little bit to follow that lower pitch. So just adding in a little more opera right there. I'll kind of zoom out so you can see this. Well, I'll zoom back in here. Yeah, a little more of that opera. Try and get this so you can see it. Yeah, good. So I'm just kind of picking areas where I think I need a little more opera. Now I'm going to pick up some of that excess. Add some more peacock blue. Pick up some with a thirsty brush. So what I'm adding now is some of that quinacridone burnt orange. You could use burnt sienna. It'd be this, pretty similar. That just happens to be what I picked up in my brush. Yeah. And this is just adding a little streaks of rust kind of looking stuff. And you'll notice I'm just using the chisel end of my, mostly I was using it, like to paint lines. That last one I kind of just flicked it a little bit. So what I'm coming in now is with some indigo. I'm just going to put in a little, I'm just going to deal with this shadow that would be on this side of this barn. Just kind of, I'm just kind of adding in that. And you see I'm not doing a really smooth, like I don't care about actually following, or trying to mimic the shape of the barn. That's not what this is about. It's just about anchoring that shape down into the shape of the other stuff, which in this case is grass. But it's just about anchoring that barn down, just pulling it down into and making it feel less like it's floating. So I'm just going to add a little opera now, just variation again. And that lighter color, while everything's still wet, it'll displace that darker color and add a little pop of brightness. So that's kind of fun. So, but really, that's all I was using. Here I'm using a little quinacridone violet and that indigo kind of mix to kind of pull that in and add a little bit of a shadow from that fence. I mean, do they work perfectly with the angle of the sun? Who knows? I don't. It just adds that a little bit more interest. It helps that fence also feel anchored into the ground. All right. I think I need to add a little bit more, uh, kind of that brushy color. And in this case, I used a little permanent yellow deep right there. And this road, even though I was working on all this other stuff, it's still a little damp. So I'm kind of just using a thirsty brush to kind of add some lighter streaks in the in that road, just so I don't totally lose that. All right, I'm going to come back over here, and I'm working with a little hooker screen now. And I'm just going to start sculpting the tops, the other shapes within this tree. So it's not just a flat blob of greens and yellows. So I want there to be, areas that are popping forward, things that are getting pushed back, and that's what all this is. So I'm coming in. Now I've got a little, I think that's a little. Why is my brain free? Little peacock blue. Just throwing that in there. Here we're back to the hooker's green. Just kind of working it so it feels, looks like, seems like the shape of leaves. But I'm not in there painting individual leaves. I don't care about that. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to give the impression of trees. So I want to push these trees back a little bit more. So I'm just going to really exaggerate the dark here. This is some indigo. And now I just want to kind of blend it up into that. I'm just going to clean my brush out and use a little water to kind of move that around. You can see I'm now using my brush kind of on its side, so that gives me a whole different kind of texture. Those hairs get pushed the wrong direction. It's a little rough on brushes, but these synthetic brushes from Low Cornell really can hold up to that. And not just Low Cornell brushes. I mean, I'm not sponsored by these guys. I don't owe them anything. They don't owe me anything. I just I happen to like their brushes. My mom discovered them, and I was like, man, these are great. So that's a little quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue that I was just adding in there. Again, just so it's not one color. I want a variety of colors. And here I'm adding, I've left a little bit of light there next to the barn. That's okay, from a distance it'll look like a little lost edge. I want some more of that lighter area of the trees and stuff to come through. So there's, it looks like there are layers and layers of trees and bushes and whatever back in there. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of that permanent green number 1. And then I'm going to spritz it with the bottle again, just to get that to sprout out. And I can even now drop some color in the little droplets of water. It's a little hard to see on screen, but there's little individual droplets of water. It's not just a fine mist of water over the whole thing. A little more quinacridone violet down in there. And some of that's mixing on the paper, so I'm getting a little darker violet because of that. That's all good. That's good stuff. Just want to kind of show that little corner of the barn there. And then I'm going to bring this dark down in here. We're going to end up losing, part of this edge of the barn, and that's okay. It'll still be visible. It's just we're going to lose a little bit of it. Here's more quinacridone violet and royal blue, and then some indigo thrown in there for good measure. Just kind of playing with those shapes that are there. I want to kind of clean this up a little bit, soften it in some spots. I don't want all the hard edges Some hard edges are good, but not everything should be a sharp hard edge like that. You want some soft, some lost and found edges. Makes it more interesting for the viewer. They get to kind of fill things in with their imagination. If I were to go around and outline everything, that'd be boring. Just adding a little more dark down in here. Felt like it needed it. May have gotten a little carried away, so I'm going to pick some of that up. Just felt like it needed a little bit, but I think I got a little too much, so basically just cleaned my brush back out and picked some of that back up. And then I can actually use some of that dark that I had on my brush from that up here in the trees. So I'm just going to kind of darken that area up, and then kind of rolling my brush and pushing it helps kind of distribute that and soften some edges, keep some edges sharp. Just rolling it. Now I've completely cleaned my brush out, wiped it off, and then I was picking some of that back up to soften. Here we're going to add a little more quinacridone violet royal blue mix. In this case it's more quinacridone violet than blue, and then here I'm adding a little bit more indigo into there. So just kind of moving around, playing with different ways of applying paint with the brush. Alright, I'm going to come back down here. I know it doesn't look like maybe on screen that I'm doing that much, but in person it looks a lot different. Well, not a lot different, but here we're going to add a little more of that orange in here. Just didn't have enough, but I wanted to read, like you can see the bushes back there, but they're a little distorted, so I'm not putting a lot of detail in them. I'm just adding a little of that color. Just to, here I'm adding a little hooker's green, so it looks like more trees back in there. Yeah, that's starting to look good. I'm liking that. I'll just hit it real quick with a hairdryer. This is sped up, so it takes a little bit longer with this hairdryer than, that's like a few minutes of hair drying, but I don't want you guys to sit through that. So coming back in with some indigo here, just to get a good contrast against the barn and against the grass stuff and shrubby stuff in the front, and to really help those trees get pushed back. Just kind of changing the shape of the bushes and stuff. Not too much detail in there where you can see through the barn, but now I'm just going to use my the point of my brush to start adding in, some little speckles and some stuff that start to look like trunks or branches and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of roll it and soften that edge there. There's a little quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, but it's a fairly dark mix, and by dark I mean it's got more blue than quinacridone violet, and it's got more pigment in it. So it's a pretty heavy wash instead of a very light wash. I don't like that shape that I made there, so I'm just going to kind of lift that a little bit, soften it. Drop back in some more of this. Just kind of changing these shapes up so they're more interesting. There. Now I'm using a little alizarin crimson. Just, a perfectly green tree, just a solid green, is not very interesting. Same with a solid green field. That's pretty boring. But if you have this variety of color and stuff going on, it's much more interesting. Plus, I have a lot of contrast, so I'm really starting to push the contrast between light and dark and mid-tones. So a little more alizarin crimson over here on this side. Now I put a lot down, but now you can see that I'm just kind of picking it back up and moving it around a little bit more just to soften that. I just want a hint of it. I did put a lot there, but not so much that I can't move it around, especially while it's still wet. So I'm just going to come back in here with a little more of that quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue, just to again add some contrast. A little more of that. In this case, I've added a little more quinacridone violet versus the blue. You know. Here we've got a little more. Same quinacridone violet mixed with royal blue. I want to pull that past the fence post. I don't want it to stop at the fence post, because that forms this weird, I don't know, just a weird thing, and it doesn't read like it reads like two different things instead of a group of shrubs or trees or whatever this is back there in the background. All right, so now I've got some of that quinacridone violet royal blue that I'm mix. Again, it's a little more violet than blue. It's still pretty, leaning towards the blue, but quite a lot of that violet. And I'm just using my number 6 round here. There's a little bit of dry brushing going on there. That was indigo that I used. I'm just kind of putting rut kind of texture in here. It helps flatten the road out so that it looks like it's receding in space and doesn't look like it's this like vertical weird shape right there. So switching back and forth between the violet mix and the indigo. That was a weird shape that I made there. I'm just gonna kind of lift that. When I'm done, I'll probably have covered that up with something else, so I won't even. Yeah, in fact, here we'll just add a little alizarin crimson. And right now, I'm just kind of building up texture, layers of texture. Kind of soften this up a little bit. It felt a little sharp. Like I don't want the whole thing to have hard edges. Some of it I want to be soft. Come back in more alizarin crimson. It's kind of funny. I went a few years there without using too much alizarin crimson, and I realized I was missing out. I really liked that. I used it for years, and then I kind of stopped for a while. Here's a little opera. I know it looks darker than it is, but let's kind of soften that up with a little water. And then back into that indigo. Now I've just cleaned my brush out and I'm softening some of those edges up just so it doesn't look too too weird. I can even pick some of it up with a rag, kind of streak the rag through that because it's so wet. I want to continue that shape, that streak shape up through and past the post. Let's pick some of that up too, but and you do have to be a little careful when using the rag. If it's wet, you want to make sure your rag's dry, or use a new paper towel or something. I just kind of like to use the rags. The paper is durable enough, especially if you're using something like Arches or Fabriano or something like that. I'm a big fan of Arches, but again, they don't pay me to say that, so. So now I'm doing some more texture for the grass here. I used a little permanent yellow deep, and now I've got a little alizarin crimson, and I'm just kind of making texture that looks, feels like, seems like grass. You know, so if it looks like it, feels like it, seems like it, then it must be it. What's that? If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and swims like a duck, it must be a duck. I don't know. I don't know. Here we got a little indigo. Why did I say that? I'm sorry. That's Hooker's green. I don't know what my brain's on default mode there or something. I don't know. I think because I was using so much of it a minute ago. But that's Hooker's green mixed with royal blue. And I'm not totally worried about the shapes that I've got going in here. A lot of this is going to be in shadow, so some of it's going to get covered up. But I do want to, be able to kind of see hints of that underneath the shadow. So just kind of softening that in some spots, leaving some hard edges, going back to some soft edges. Add a little bit more of that alizarin crimson up in here. Most of this is not going to even matter, but some of it will be visible. I just don't know what yet. So I kind of want to add a little. I mean, I kind of know the general area where I'm going to put some shadows, but we'll see how that goes. So this is just, more alizarin crimson right in there. So now I'm going to come back in a little more alizarin, just to kind of darken the bottom of some of this grass. So that's just, alizarin crimson that I'm dropping in there. And really, I probably shouldn't be spending as much time on this as I am, but we'll just kind of spread that out, soften that up, add a little more. That's just water that I'm kind of picking up a little bit of stuff to soften some areas. And we'll just hit it with the dryer real quick. And now I'm going to start on these shadows. Like I said, I'm probably going to end up covering up half of what I did there. So this is a little indigo that I'm using first. Now I've switched up to a little opera. And, again, it's one of those things where, for some reason, opera looks really good in a shadow. I don't know. It's just, maybe it's the variation in value and color. Here I'm going to use a little, that quinacridone burnt orange. I could use, burnt sienna, anything like that. It's all kind of good. I'm going to kind of change that shape a little bit. So just indigo down in here. And these, I don't know what these shadows are of. Maybe they're trees, maybe it's a cloud. Who knows? It doesn't matter. This is a device to kind of get your eye to move around the page and to see the piece, to move around it. All these shadows are that. They're just devices to kind of. This is feeling more like a shadow of a tree or something. I don't know if there are trees there. I don't remember. A little more indigo over here. This shadow is just going to kind of anchor the bottom of the page. So maybe we're standing over there in the shade while we're looking at this, taking this in. It's kind of. That's a little hooker's green there that I'm mixed with royal blue that I'm just dropping in. A couple spots. Just using my flat brush for that for now. But you can see it already adds some really cool contrast to that existing road. I'm going to drop in a little more opera just to displace some of those real darks. Also, you can see I'm leaving a whole lot of white. Well, it's not white anymore because there's paint underneath it, but lighter areas when I'm not I'm not painting this solid. It's not a solid shadow. It's just a shape with some dappled, leaf kind of stuff. Let's see, I'm going to just drop in a little more indigo right in here. And you can use peacock blue, you can use indigo, all sorts of stuff. It just makes it a more interesting shadow, more interesting shape. I'm going to just use my thirsty brush to pick up some of this excess. If you don't, you'll end up with water running back into, as that water towards the top of the page starts to dry and it pushes, the other water kind of puddles at the bottom. You'll end up with, if you have too much water, you'll end up with these weird blossoms. In this case, that maybe add more interest to the edge of the paper than you really want. I'm going to hit that real quick with a hairdryer. Now I'm going to come back in with a little more. That's a lizard, not a lizard group. That's quinacridone violet that I just added in there. And then because I was using it, well, now I'm using alizarin crimson. The first time stuff I put down was quinacridone violet. And you can see it mixed on my brush, so I ended up with a little bit of dark. And that's okay, it just makes it interesting. I'm going to just pick up some of that excess water where I feel like maybe it's too dark. And I'm going to add a little more of that quinacridone violet down in there. All right, so I'm gonna hit this with the hairdryer again. Just want to kind of make sure this is dry. You can see it dried quite a bit. You know, it's drying quite a bit lighter than it was. All right, so I'm going to zoom back out here a little bit so you can kind of get a better look at this. Kind of take a minute to figure out what I want to do. So I'm going to just come in here with a little, this is going to be the next shadow going across. Starting off with indigo again. Now I've switched up to my number 8 round. You know, this is a slightly smaller shape than that first one. You know, I mean, like in height, width-wise, it's going to go fairly far across the page, but I want a little better control in this case. So just kind of, I'm going to use that number 8 round. It gets a pretty good point. Little opera again. Just to mix it up, just kind of makes it more interesting. Here we're going back to the to a blue. This is peacock blue here. Just going to pull that across. The general shape and direction of where a shadow would be cast. Just kind of bringing that across. Here I've switched to some quinacridone violet and royal blue mix. A little more of that. Sorry about that. Here I've switched to that quinacridone burnt orange. Again, you can substitute burnt sienna in here. That's a great color. I use it all the time. In this case, I just thought I'd use some of the burnt orange. I was going to say sorry about the talking in the background. As I stated at the beginning, I'm in an open studio space, so there's a coffee shop in here. There's all sorts of cool gallery stuff and other artists, so just got to bear with me. I apologize. Here we moved in with a little, that was a little Hooker's Green and blue mix. Now we're back into some quinacridone violet. Just got to pull that up in and over. Gonna soften this edge as I get closer to the edge of the paper. A little less important to be, you know, so sharp. And I'm just going to soften this top part of this shadow as well. Sometimes if you can't get it to lift, just by adding water to the page and then adding a little more color, you can get a softer edge that covers up the harder edge. So sometimes things don't lift as well as you'd like. Most of the time, though, they lift pretty good. So, all right, let's see back in here. That's a little more of that Hooker's Green royal blue mix. Oh, look at that. Trick is when you do something like that, don't panic. Just grab a rag, blot it. It's still wet. You never even know it was there. That kind of stuff happens to me all the time, and the trick is to just not panic. Heck, I've had things running down my page and didn't notice right away. I think we're going to go with one more, like a third shadow that kind of comes in across here. Maybe there's a line of trees, you know, like a windbreak or something. I don't know. Um, and this is, um, excuse me, this is peacock blue that I'm using at the moment. But because it's on top of that other stuff, it looks darker. I'll just drop in a little quinacridone violet royal blue mix along the bottom there. Just kind of add a little more back in here. Now each time I'm going back to my palette, I'm cleaning my brush and then I'm grabbing fresh paint. In this case, I'm using some opera, so I clean my brush out completely and grabbed some opera, uh, just so I have fresh, clean paint on my brush. If you see me going back to the palette, I'm generally grabbing more water because I want water in the brush, and then I'm grabbing more color off my palette. But I always want to have that consistent water. So here we've got quinacridone violet that I just added there. So now I'm adding a little more peacock blue in, just all along there. Just to kind of finish out that edge, or the end. Uh, and again, just for variety, might add a little more down in here, just, well, this is, kind of gives it that blue-green kind of look. Now, I really want this pretty dark around here. I want to help anchor that. So just kind of thinking about where I want these darker darks to be inside that shadow. So a little more quinacridone violet. Down in here, just to kind of help blend this in a little bit more. I don't want that sharp edge there because it's not like a secondary shadow or something. It's just a little darker area. Add a little bit more dark up in here. This is quinacridone violet again, mixed with, in this case I mixed it with some indigo just to give it a little different. And I just want a little more right over here, and just kind of making that darker back in there. And let me kind of zoom in a little bit and reposition this. Alright, now that I got that repositioned, I'm just coming back in here with some darker darks, kind of cleaning some of this up that looks a little too jaggedy. Um, Here I've got, I'm just going to kind of pull a slightly darker bit up in here underneath. Uh, Maybe a little more shadow because it's not picking up any uh, light bouncing off of the surrounding area. And it just kind of highlights the eave, how it's sticking out from the edge of the building. Here I'm just going to paint in a little shadow. This is quinacridone violet again. And now I've picked up a little of the indigo, maybe a little too much, so I'm just going to kind of wipe some of that back up. This is just, I want the color of the barn to kind of show through that, so that's why I painted the whole face, and then I'm adding the shadow on top.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll stop here for the day. We'll pick this up again in the next video. 2 hours is a pretty good long time. So I don't want to overwhelm you guys, but let me know. Do you like these long form videos? Would you like more short form videos? Would you like a mix of both? Let me know in the comments. If you have any other questions about maybe something I was doing that you didn't quite understand, shoot me a comment as well in down below. Um, I will be uploading the photo and the sketch that I created for this, so you can use those and to paint along with me if you want. So I'm going to make those available in the comments below, and or in the description, I should say. The doodly do, as the Greens like to say. um, with that, I think I will. Well, I'm going to ask you guys to like, share, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, Michael Bullock Watercolors, or on Facebook, Michael Bullock Watercolors. And like I said, like, share, subscribe. It really helps me out. And if you subscribe, you'll get notifications of my next video, especially if you want to continue with this painting. That's a good way, and see what else I'm going to do and work on and whatnot. So clearly, I am not practiced at this, but we're all having fun here. We're all learning together. Uh, so yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. Comment, leave me a comment, whatever. Um, and I hope you've been having fun. So with that, I'll leave you with a couple of parting thoughts. The first one's from a good friend of mine, Dwight Lawing. He's another watercolorist. Used to have a studio space right next to me here in the the gallery, and he once said that nothing great was ever painted with a number two paintbrush. So use a bit bigger brush. That's what the point he was making. And then a thought that so kind of my motto is, life's too short to paint on cheap paper. Get the good stuff. You can cheap out on other stuff, but the paper is so important. Once you paint on good paper, you'll never go back, and it'll just make your experience that much better. So with that, I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.